Picture this. You just met the absolute perfect person. I mean, the chemistry is instant, the conversation is totally effortless, and the night is just purely magical. And then, instead of simply asking for their phone number, you leave it entirely up to the universe to decide if you will ever see them again. Sounds completely insane, right? Well, today we are diving into the wild premise of leaving a perfect romantic connection entirely up to the invisible hands of destiny, as we break down a story that somehow still captures our collective imagination. So that brings us to a huge, fundamental question. Do we make our own luck, or is destiny already written? It's a massive thing to think about, right? And to explore it, we're going to look at the 2001 film Serendipity. By breaking down the timeline, the tests, and the underlying psychology of this story, we'll see exactly why this decades-old narrative remains so incredibly relevant to our own lives and, frankly, our modern dating exhaustion today.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the premise of destiny, meeting the perfect person and walking away.
It all kicks off with Jonathan Traeger and Sarah Thomas. They're total strangers who literally cross paths, fighting over the very last pair of black cashmere gloves at Bloomingdale's in New York City. The spark? It's immediate. You know, they do the whole magical New York evening, they grab dessert at the famous Serendipity 3 Cafe, go ice skating in Central Park, and just spend hours wandering the city effortlessly. It is literally the textbook perfect date. But here is where the story hard pivots from your standard romance into something completely different.
Which leads us to Section 2, the grand experiment, a gauntlet for the universe.
Okay, so it's the end of the night. Logic says just swap phone numbers, right? But Sarah, she's a massive believer in fate. So instead of doing the easy, normal thing, she sets up this wild, high-stakes test. Step 1, she makes Jonathan write his name and number on a $5 bill, which she then promptly spends at a kiosk for some mints, sending it out into the massive economy of New York City. Step 2, she writes her own name and number inside a copy of the classic novel Love in the Time of Cholera and promises to sell it to a random used bookstore the very next day.
Let that sink in for a second. She leaves their entire potential future completely up to these astronomical odds. Her logic is simple, but honestly kind of terrifying. If they are truly meant to be together, those specific, isolated items will somehow find their way back to them. And if the universe doesn't deliver, well, it was just a nice evening. And just like that, she walks away, leaving the whole shebang in destiny's hands.
Moving on to Section 3, the what-if years, the cruelty and suspense of coincidence.
Well, as you've probably guessed, the universe doesn't exactly work on our preferred schedule. Fast forward several years. The universe seemingly ghosted them on the $5 bill in the book. Jonathan and Sarah have moved on. They're living on opposite sides of the country now. Jonathan in New York, Sarah out in San Francisco. And they're both engaged to other people. They have these seemingly perfect lives on paper, but both are quietly unfulfilled. Then we hit wedding week, and the frantic, parallel scavenger hunts begin.
With their weddings just days away, neither of them can shake the ghost of that one magical night. It drives them completely crazy, launching them both into desperate action. Jonathan actually gets his best friend to help track down Sarah's identity, using nothing but a faded old Bloomingdale's account number from that original glove purchase. Meanwhile, Sarah just abandons her wedding prep and flies to New York on a total whim, desperately hoping for a clear sign that she should call off her marriage.
And guys, the story absolutely tortures us here. Jonathan and Sarah are operating in perfect parallel. I mean, they're in the exact same hotel. They are riding in the same elevators, and yet they are constantly missing each other by mere seconds. It is an absolute masterclass in building suspense through pure coincidence. You're sitting there watching them occupy the exact same spaces, kept apart by just a breath of bad timing.
Right when the tension hits that unbearable peak, and you think there's just no way they're pulling this off, the universe finally cashes in its chips. Against literally all logical and statistical odds, the signs finally align. The night before his wedding, Jonathan is given a copy of Love in the Time of Cholera by his own fiancée, and yep, it's the exact copy with Sarah's name and number inside. At the exact same time, while on an airplane, Sarah is handed her change, and staring right back at her is the exact $5 bill with Jonathan's information. The specific items find their way back, pulling them like magnets to reunite at the Central Park ice rink right as the snow starts falling.
That brings us to our final part, Section 4, the psychology of fate, and exactly why this impossible story still resonates with us.
You might be wondering, why does a story relying on odds that are literally 1,000,000 to 1 still work so well for a modern audience? Well, it cuts straight to the core of human psychology. On one side, making choices is just hard. Navigating modern dating, finding the right partner, making big career moves, it is all incredibly stressful and deeply exhausting. But on the other side, trusting the process. This story offers the ultimate fantasy, the fantasy that you just don't have to force things, that if you let go of the steering wheel, an invisible hand is going to step in and effortlessly guide you exactly where you need to be.
Think of this movie as the cinematic equivalent of a warm blanket. It's this comforting buffer for an incredibly exhausted modern audience. I mean, we are constantly told that we have to hustle, we have to swipe, we have to optimize every single choice we make. A story like this, it gives us permission to just breathe. It provides the profound comfort of surrendering control to destiny, even if it's just for a couple of hours.
It really beautifully reframes how we look at our own lives. Our mistakes, our detours, and our near misses aren't failures. They're just the universe taking the scenic route. When things go wrong or the timing is off, it's so easy to beat yourself up and view it as a failure. But looking at the world through the lens of destiny suggests that every wrong turn is actually just a required step in a much larger, invisible plan. It completely removes the sting of regret.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Was Sarah's test a real romantic leap of faith, or was it just completely reckless? Is there a healthy balance between trusting destiny and making your own luck, or are those two ideas just fundamentally at odds? Think about how much control you truly want over your own path and how much you're actually willing to leave up to the universe. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this gave you a fascinating new way to look at the invisible forces in your own life.